Who would have thought that one of the hottest tickets in New York City would be a 50-year-old drama by an 83-year-old playwright? No one should be surprised when the play is a modern classic, Death of a Salesman, and the playwright is a living legend, Arthur Miller. An acclaimed revival of the play opened on Broadway last month. And as Dan Rather discovered recently, its author continues to find new surprises and new life in his most famous work. Dan's update of the story in a moment, but first, a flashback to 12 years ago when we last spoke with Arthur Miller. You wrote Death of a Salesman when you were 33 years old. How long did it take you?
Well, the first act, more or less, was a matter of one day and a night. I then rested and worked about 6 weeks on the second act and put the whole thing together. But, of course, there's a lifetime in that play.
You were never anything but a hard-working drummer who landed in the ash can like all the rest of them. I'm $1 an hour, Willie. I tried 7 states and couldn't raise it. $1 an hour. Do you gather my meaning? Vengeful, spiteful. I'm nothing. I'm nothing. Can't you understand that? There's no spite in it anymore. I'm just what I am, that's all.
Death of a Salesman was a triumph for Arthur Miller. It won him both the Pulitzer Prize and the New York Drama Critics Award. The critics were comparing him to Henrik Ibsen and Eugene O'Neill.
You inevitably begin to feel a kind of impact of power, which is sexual, it is financial, it is everything. You begin to shift and change if you're not careful, which I wasn't. People now were talking to me differently. Women, men, they were looking at me like an icon of some kind.
Arthur Miller came a long way for a Jewish boy born in Harlem and raised in Brooklyn. He was the son of an immigrant coat manufacturer, a man who couldn't read English. His father lost everything in the crash of 1929, and so Miller grew up a child of the Depression, and that was to show in his writing and his politics. During the middle 40s, Miller wrote what he called trunk plays. That's where they wound up, in the trunk. And he had one flop on Broadway. Discouraged, he gave himself one last chance at playwriting and wrote All My Sons in 1947. It was a breakthrough for him, a success. But nothing prepared him for the success of Death of a Salesman and the impact it would have on his personal life and his marriage. The night that it opened.
Well, then I felt with my wife then.
Mary Slattery.
Yes, that we were... It wasn't enough for me, suddenly. I thought I had a feeling that we were not close, that we were not one.
That you had outgrown her?
I'd outgrown her.
It's hard for you to say.
Yeah.
The Millers kept their marriage together through the early 50s, a period in which he produced The Crucible, a play about the Salem witch trials. That play opened during the hearings of the House Un-American Activities Committee, and the parallels were striking. A few years later, he heard from the committee himself. They wanted to ask him about some left-wing meetings he had gone to. They wanted you to name names.
Yeah.
And what'd you say to them?
I said, look, I'll tell you about me, but I'm not going to tell you about anybody else. What are we talking about? We're talking about actors, a few playwrights, most of them were actors, directors. What earthly effect could these people have on security in the United States or anything else?
It was during this time that Miller divorced his first wife, Mary, and his impending marriage to Marilyn Monroe became headlines in the tabloids. Miller maintains that his appearance before that committee, in a strange way, had more to do with Marilyn than with the committee's search for communists.
Chairman Walter proposed to my lawyer just before the hearing began that if it could be arranged for him to take a photograph with Marilyn, he'd call off the whole thing.
The congressman wanted a photograph with Marilyn Monroe.
That's with himself.
Yes.
In the picture. We could have aborted the whole thing in 5 minutes. So that's why. Yeah. And I didn't do it.
Their marriage caused a sensation. Arthur Miller moved from the theater pages to the gossip columns. He wrote about her, I never saw her unhappy in a crowd. Her stardom was her triumph, nothing less. It was her life's achievement. The simple fact, terrible and lethal, was that no space existed between herself and this star. She was Marilyn Monroe, and that was what was killing her.
You knew that it was doomed.
I didn't know it was doomed, but I certainly felt it had a good chance to be.
You said to her, I keep trying to teach myself how to lose you, but I can't learn yet. And she says, why must you lose me?
Well, it just shows you the power of instinct over what's left of your brains at such moments when you're being drawn to someone and you sense that it may not work and you can't stop it anyway.
Your face changes when you talk about her.
Excuse me?
Your face changes when you talk about her.
In what way?
Well, I think you're still... Those were tough years.
Terrible.
Wonderful years and terrible years.
Sure. They were. Oh, there was a lot of pain. Certainly for her, and certainly for me.
Wow, what did it do to you?
Well, it's a defeat. It always is. She was full of the most astonishing turns and revelations about people. She was a super sensitive instrument. And that's exciting to be around until it starts to self-destruct.
And you and Marilyn were divorced when?
About 61.
And you married Inga a year later?
Yeah, later, yeah.
Today, at the age of 72, Arthur Miller spends most of the time at his house in the Connecticut countryside. He has been married for 25 years now to Inga Morath, a world-class photographer. They have a daughter, Rebecca, who is a promising young actress. He has a small cabin on the property where he still writes every day.
Writing every day, right up in that building.
Plays?
Yeah, I'm writing a play now. Don't ask me why, but I love doing it. Life without work, to me, would be incredible. It's like breathing. That's who I am on that table.
In 1984, he received the Kennedy Center honor for lifetime achievement. And actor Carl Malden thanked Miller on behalf of all American actors.
You put it on paper. That's where it all starts, on the page. If it's not on the page, it's not there. You did it. There isn't an actor in this country who wouldn't rob, beg, or steal just to be in one of your plays. So here I stand, Arthur.
You ever think about an epitaph?
Epitaph. Never gave it a moment's thought.
Give it a moment.
The first thought that occurs to me is he worked awful hard. But that's hardly a recommendation. Everybody does, or a lot of people do.
And what did he work for?
Oh, some little moment of truth up on that stage that people could feel made them a little more human.
12 years after that conversation, Arthur Miller is still a long way from wanting or needing an epitaph. In a moment, Dan Rather talks with him about his Broadway revival.
CBS Market Watch Update, sponsored by Charles Schwab.
Good evening. The big three automakers report strong sales gains for February. Ford workers will get record profit-sharing checks, about $6,000. The Japanese may be drowning their economic sorrows. Wine imports doubled last year. On Wall Street, stock prices closed mixed. I'm Anthony Mason, CBS News.
When Diane initially came into the office, her time horizon for investing her money was rather short-term. It was right after college. I was going to turn...
Years since Mike Wallace talked with Arthur Miller, Miller continues to write, to work, and to see his characters reborn again and again on countless stages around the world. In February, 50 years to the day after its first opening night, Death of a Salesman opened again on Broadway to a different world in a different time.
I couldn't get past Yonkers today. Where are you guys? Where are you? The woods are burning. I can't drive a...
Tell me about this new production.
It's dark, it's rough, it's tough. It's the difference between 1948 and 1999. And, of course, Brian Dennehy is a kind of an actor who throws himself on his sword. It's all out every night. I don't know how he goes on doing this.
Stop yelling at him, will you, Pop? I was talking.
The words are a half-century old, but they still attract sold-out crowds and rave reviews.
Yelling at him! I'm $1 an hour, Willie. I tried 7 states and couldn't raise it. $1 an hour. Do you gather my meaning?
Remember this scene with George Segal and Lee J. Cobb, the original Willie Loman.
There's no spite in it anymore. I'm just what I am, that's all.
The power still resonates with the new cast in 1999.
I'm nothing! I'm nothing, Bob! Will you take that phony dream? And will you burn it before something happens?
How does a play born of 1940s family values stay current at the end of the century? They've made a few adjustments. Among the most striking, Willie's wife, Linda Loman, played by Elizabeth Franz.
He is not to be allowed to fall into his grave like an old dog. Now attention! Attention must finally be paid to such a person.
She's now playing it in a way I've never seen that part played. I never dreamed it could be played that way, and that is, instead of being the rather meek, supporting wife, she's outraged.
When I exert him, I hope I don't outlive it.
Get out of here.
Mom! Mom!
And that kind of force is completely new to me.
Do you or do you not think that has this something to do with the role of women in American society circa 1940s and the difference of women in the 1990s?
Just about to say, you're absolutely right. This couldn't have happened back then. This interpretation of that role is a result of the women's movement, the result of the different attitude of women toward themselves, toward their lives, toward their families, and so on. She's herself now. Same role, same lines, same situations. It's totally different.
Through the years, Miller has generally kept his hands off new productions, but he's been intimately involved with this one.
You seem so enthused about this that...
I am.
And you go down to the theater?
I've never seen such life come on stage in a long time.
Is that why you're down there working and talking to the actors?
Well, I went to many rehearsals when they were in New York. And I give them notes, tell them what they should be doing. They sometimes do what I tell them.
Death of a Salesman deals with the family, with adultery, with desperation. But Miller finds the economic story of a salesman's struggle just to earn a living also continues to hit home, though it was written when the Depression was fresh in Americans' minds.
I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, Howard. Howard, are you firing me? I think you need a good long rest, Willie. Howard.
Here we are in the 1990s, late in the 1990s, with a sustained economic boom. Frankly, I'm surprised that the new audience finds these themes and it resonates with them.
It makes you wonder, at least it makes me wonder, whether underneath all the boom is a certain insecurity, a certain sense that the bottom might drop out anyway, and that we are always riding gaily at the edge of the precipice. And one false move and down we go.
You're still writing?
I'm in the middle of another play, God help me. I always do that. I'm always writing.
To update you on a few other things, he's still married to Inga Morath. It's been 37 years now. And in the last 12 years, 5 new Miller plays have opened.
I'll get an advance.
But he appears destined never to top Death of a Salesman.
No, I'm gonna do it.
Oh, that's the spirit, Willie!
The play will go on, long after the traveling salesmen are gone.
Will Death of the Salesman stay alive and vivid through the information age?
God knows. I have a feeling, which is based partly upon the career of this play, I must say, that we don't change very much. I mean, 25 years ago, people were telling me there'll never be another time when Death of a Salesman will be pertinent. That's when all the narcotics were flying around and everybody was on cloud nine. Well, they're all gone, but the play's still there.
The play is still there, and so thankfully is Arthur Miller. I'm Dan Rather. We'll be back next Wednesday with a brand new edition.